My name is Sloane Mercer. I am 32, and I do PR for a living, which means I spend my days making other people's decisions sound intentional. And yet, apparently I was less skilled at applying this to my own. I had been married for 2 years and I was, by most observable metrics, good at it. I kept the flat clean, I showed up to the things, I did not become my mother. What I did not account for was how much energy it takes to perform not becoming something, and how eventually the performance is all you can see when you look in the mirror. I had been married for 2 years and I was, by most observable metrics, good at it. I kept the flat clean. I showed up to the things. I did not become my mother, which had been, since I was 14 years old, the primary organizing principle of my adult choices. My mother remarried 18 months after my father left and became, slowly and then completely, the quiet kind of wife, present, reliable and invisible at parties. Visible. His new partner was the interesting one, the one people looked at across rooms. I watched this happen at a specific and formative age, and I decided that being chosen and being kept were two different transactions, and I intended to stay in the first one indefinitely. Daniel made breakfast on Saturdays without being asked about it. He was good at the logistics of living with another person, the providing, the planning, the making sure things ran. In the second year of dating, he spent a full weekend teaching himself to make a Lebanese meze my grandmother used to prepare, a dish I had mentioned once in passing, as something I missed from childhood. He did not get it exactly right. He got it close enough that something happened in my chest that surprised both of us, and we understood what it meant without turning it into language. That was real. I am not trying to say it was not. Saturday mornings in Clapham, coffee he brought to wherever I was sitting, the specific comfort of shared quiet, his laptop open while I read. The ring on my finger caught the light over the kitchen sink, and I looked at it for a second. The thin band, the small diamond, ordinary in the way things become ordinary when they have been on your finger for 2 years. And then I turned the tap off and did not think about it again. He looked up from the laptop and asked, without accusation, whether I had been going out with Reva more than I used to. I told him the nightlife client required ongoing presence. It was part of the account. He nodded and went back to what he was doing. He asks, and then continues. That is how he does most things. I took it as trust. And yet, somewhere underneath the word trust, something I had not yet named was already waiting to be named. That evening I got dressed for a client event. He glanced up and said something about how I looked, then the laptop. I stood in the hallway for 3 seconds in the dress, with nowhere specific to put a feeling that appeared and was already going. Then I left. He was finishing something. He was always finishing something. The work dinner at the Bermondsey restaurant was a client celebration, 7 people, legitimate expense, a table I had booked through the agency account. The occasion was real. What was less clearly real was why, 11 days before this dinner, I had given a freelance brand consultant named Theo my personal number rather than the agency contact page. I had been telling myself this was standard. Theo worked in the nightlife orbit. He came recommended through the club's creative director and was, professionally, someone worth knowing. He asked smart questions in meetings and could hold a conversation about 3 different cities he had actually been to, which in my professional world was not as common as people assumed. He had also, 11 days prior, asked me what I thought about something. Not what I recommended, not what the data suggested, what I thought. He waited for the answer. He seemed genuinely interested in whether the answer arrived. Apparently I had not been asked that specific question in what I measured, without finding any humour in the measurement, as 2 quarters of marriage becoming an arrangement I administered rather than occupied. So I gave him the personal number. I told myself this was efficient. At the Bermondsey dinner, he sat across the table and the conversation was the kind you do not have to manage. It moved on its own, which almost never happens in professional settings. By 10, I had stayed an hour past when I planned to leave. Daniel texted at past. Still on? I picked up the phone. I typed wrapping up and looked at it for 3 seconds and sent it. I stayed another hour and 20 minutes. In the car going home, I thought about the question he kept asking. Each time the same quality of attention. Each time the same genuine wait for whatever I said next. I did not think about the text. 2 days later, Daniel sat across from me after dinner. He kept his voice level and named 3 specific evenings in the past 2 weeks where I had come home past midnight. He said he felt like he no longer knew what my evenings looked like. He was factual about it, the way he was factual about most things, presenting the data, waiting for the explanation. I told him the nightlife account had a dense launch calendar and client presence was part of the job. He said he understood that. Then he said that what he meant was something different from the schedule. He meant he felt like he was not part of the picture. I heard surveillance dressed as concern. He meant grief in the only register available to him. He did not push after I redirected. He asked, I answered. He accepted it and moved on. That was his specific limitation. He could name a fact, but not the feeling underneath it. So when the feeling was the whole point of the conversation, she-conversation went nowhere useful. I knew this about him. I used the knowledge more than I examined it. The following morning I had coffee with Reva in the agency meeting room, corner table, away from the open floor. Reva was 30, perpetually single by her own stated preference, and she processed the world through a lens of I told you so directed at everyone who had ever suggested she might want to settle down. Having a married friend who was still interesting, still in rooms, still getting looked at, was, I understood later, a kind of evidence she needed. She needed me to remain exciting because if I became the quiet wife, her singleness became about something she did not want to examine. I told her about Theo in careful terms, someone in the account orbit. Someone who asked real questions. She said I was 32 with a major client account, and of course I was allowed to have a conversation with someone interesting. She laughed. I laughed. The enthusiasm of her response told me everything about why she was responding that way. And yet I was glad for it. I was glad for it in the specific way you are glad for things that confirm what you have already decided. Cassidy was at the Bermondsey dinner. I had known her for 8 years. She had been at our wedding. She had my grandmother's Mies recipe saved in her phone. She had sat with me through most of the things that mattered. She was at the far end of the table, and she saw the specific quality of my posture when Theo spoke. She saw it and filed it. She did not say anything that evening. She told me later, much later, that she had spent those weeks trying to decide whether naming it was worth the cost. She was still deciding. Jenna had been at the dinner too with her husband. She told him that night. He filed it without acting on it immediately. He had known Daniel for 9 years and he was, he told me afterward, hoping it would amount to nothing. Both of them knew what they had seen. Neither of them said anything to me. 3 days later, Cassidy's text came in. 2 sentences where there usually were 6 or 8, carefully worded where she was usually easy, measuring each word in a way that was not her normal way. I read it 3 times before I sent back something normal. I put my phone face down. I went back to the quarterly report I was working on and read the same paragraph 4 times before any of it stayed. The club PR account was the most complex one I managed. The client was demanding in the specific way nightlife clients are demanding. They wanted presence, texture, the lived experience of the space in the content we produced. My being there on the launch night of the new room was not a choice I had made around Theo. It was a contractual obligation I had named in the original scope. This is what I told myself before we arrived. And yet, I met Reva at her flat first. 2 drinks, music playing, the ease of being in a room where no one required anything from me that I had not already given. I got dressed in her bathroom mirror, the dress I had chosen 3 days in advance, the shoes, the specific way I wanted to look. I looked at my reflection and thought, this person. This is still this person. I put my wedding ring in my coat pocket at the door because the crowd would be thick and things caught. That was why. That was the complete reason. The club's main room had a bass frequency that sat low in the chest, not unpleasant, specific, the kind of sound that locates you in your body and nowhere else. Theo was there, which I had known would be the case because he had been CC'd on the venue emails. We found each other near the bar sometime in the first hour, and the conversation was easy in the way it had been at the Bermondsey dinner, the way it always was, which was becoming a data point I was declining to process. After the second drink, people moved onto the floor and I moved with them, which was also part of the job. Client presence, atmosphere documentation, the living evidence that the space worked. Men moved near me the way they do in rooms like that, and I did not step back. One put his hands on my waist and I turned toward him, which was legible to everyone in the room. Another came close and I allowed this also. Theo watched from near the wall. The expression on his face was warm. I read it as warmth. I understand now that what I was actually looking at was the expression of a man watching someone do something that removed a responsibility he had been quietly considering whether to take on. The club's social media manager worked the floor with a camera, part of the brand rollout I had designed myself. The tagging protocol, the highlight reel, the timestamps. I had written the brief. I had specified the turnaround time. The post went up at 1:47 a.m. with my name in the caption and my agency tagged, which was exactly what the protocol specified. I got home at 3. The living room light was on. Daniel was sitting in the chair near the window with nothing in his hands. Not his phone, not a book, just his hands in his lap, and the specific quality of someone who has been sitting there for a while and is not going to pretend otherwise. I said I was tired. He said he knew. 2 words in a register I had not heard from him before. Not angry, not cold, something cleaner than either. The register of someone who has finished a very long thought and reached a conclusion and is not yet ready to name it. I went to bed. In the morning his side was already made, and he was in the kitchen when I came out, which was normal except for the way he handed me coffee, passing it without looking up, the gesture efficient and nothing more. He asked me, while I was looking at my phone, where I would put the club night in terms of what the account required. Quiet. The quietest he had ever been asking me something. He was not asking about the account. I told him it was one of the most important touch points of the launch cycle. He said he understood that. He did not say anything else. The quiet after the sentence was different from the quiet that preceded it. I told myself he was processing, that this was what he did with things. He processed, and then he returned to normal. I had seen this before. It would pass. The ring was in my coat pocket when I found it the next morning, looking for my transit card. I put it back on. And yet, the coat had hung in the hallway all night, and I had not thought of it once. The post had 14 shares by 7:48 a.m. I sent the social media manager a message framed as a brand consistency note, style issue, specificity of tagging language, a flag for future content. Professional, clear, nothing in it that named what I was actually doing. The post stayed up. He thanked me for the note. Reva sent 4 words in the morning. That evening, when I mentioned the post, she asked whether I wanted her to call someone. Then silence for the rest of the day. One signal, landing smaller than it should have. Cassidy saw the post before my message reached the manager. She took a screenshot. She put her phone on her kitchen counter and stood there for 6 minutes. She told me this number later, as a fact, not to make me feel anything specific about it. She did not contact me. She did not contact Daniel. She made coffee and went to work, and put the screenshot somewhere she knew she would be able to find if she ever needed to. 3 days after the club night, I went to Cassidy's house. I initiated it, which tells you something. I already knew something needed managing, even if I was not calling it that yet. She did not raise her voice. Cassidy has never been the kind of person who raises her voice to make a point, which is both her best quality and the reason her points land so cleanly. She named 3 instances: the Bermondsey dinner, a work event in January I had forgotten she attended, and the club. She said she had been watching me perform the energy of a woman with nothing waiting at home for 8 months. She said she was not going to make it anyone else's business, but she was also not going to sit there and pretend she had not been watching. I deflected via the conferences, 6 of them, 4 months. Not once asked. I told her she had no idea what it was like to hold everything together while your husband went somewhere interesting and assumed your silence was contentment. She said she understood that. Then she said, "And yet the question stands." My own words in her mouth. She did not smile when she said it. I drove home with nothing useful in my head. That evening I found Daniel at the kitchen window, his back to me, the kettle on the counter behind him with the water inside it already boiled and gone cold. 2 mugs. He had put them out and then stood there without pouring anything, and apparently had been there for a while. When he heard me come in, he turned. He made no effort with his face, no composure, no efficiency, no careful arrangement. Just his actual face, at the end of a long day of something I had not been present for. He said he did not know how to be someone I wanted to come home to anymore. He said it quietly, like naming a fact about himself he had been carrying longer than I knew. I heard, a bid for sympathy designed to shift the weight of the problem onto my shoulders. He was, apparently, making his sadness into something I was supposed to fix. That was his pattern. Feelings as logistics, grief as a problem with a solution he expected me to identify. I told him I needed to change and went to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. He poured the cold water anyway and drank it alone at the counter, which I did not see but understood later. The following day I prepared a real conversation. I knew what I was willing to offer and what I was not. I had ordered it. I had set the temperature before it began. I told him I had been feeling like a fixture in his life rather than a person he chose. I told him the conference cycle made me feel like the person who held the flat while he went somewhere interesting. This was true. I gave him this truth and withheld everything that would have required a different conversation. He said he had not known she felt that way. He said he thought I was fine because I had not said otherwise. His limitation, present in the sentence, he had left the door open for her to walk through it and called the opening consideration. I accepted his response and the conversation ended before anything was actually resolved. I told myself I had managed it. What I had actually done was give him a clear outline of a space I had not filled in, and now the outline was visible. The phone photo arrived during the second evening, while I was waiting for Reva to respond to a message that had been sitting on 2 blue ticks for 40 minutes. I was scrolling without a destination when I found it. Tom had taken it at a dinner 3 years ago, someone's birthday, 6 people around a table. I was mid-laugh looking at Daniel because he had said something and I had no prepared response and the laugh just came out of me, unmanaged, while I was looking at someone I was not trying to impress. I held the phone. The woman in that photo was not performing anything. There was no audience she was aware of. The laugh was not the laugh I used in rooms. It was just a laugh, happening because something was funny, and I was looking at someone and the looking was enough. Something was forming at the edge of this. That the performance started as a shield against becoming invisible, but the performance... I was almost at the end of this thought, almost at the shape of what it was costing. The performance was the thing that was actually making her. I put the phone face down. That woman, I told myself, did not yet know what the marriage was going to require of her. She grew up. I grew up. I made coffee and did not look at the photo again. 2 days later, Alec called Daniel. He was careful about it. 9 years of friendship required care. He said there had been observations made by people at the Bermondsey dinner, and he wanted Daniel to know that the situation was not entirely private. He did not use names. He did not specify. He said he thought Daniel deserved to know that people had noticed. Daniel did not tell me about this call. That evening, passing through the bedroom, I watched him move his gym bag from the hallway cupboard to the wardrobe. He said nothing about it. He was reorganizing. It was his wardrobe, his bag, his preference. And yet I stood in the doorway for a moment watching him do it, and then walked past and said nothing. because saying something would have required naming what I was looking at. Jenna removed me from the summer trip group text. I found out 2 days later when I went to respond to something and my name was simply absent. The thread was still active. It continued without me in it the way threads do when someone has made a quiet decision about who is in a room and who is not. 12 days after the club night, I called Theo and told him I needed to talk. I went to a hotel bar near Holborn. Neutral, not the kind of place either of us usually went. And I sat across from him and explained everything. The tagged post, the conversation with Cassidy, the way the flat had been different since that night, Daniel's face by the kitchen window. Theo listened the way he always listened. He asked what I was going to do. He waited for the answer. By the end of the second glass, I had made plans to see him the following week. I had not ended anything. I understood this in the car 8 minutes after leaving, with the specificity of someone reading a damage report. I had gone there to close a door and sat on the threshold for 90 minutes instead. In the lobby on the way out, I saw Nadia. Jenna's younger sister works near Holborn, had been at 4 couple dinners over 2 years. She saw me with Theo. She said hello and kept walking. I processed this fact in the car, in the dark, when the processing was no longer useful. Daniel was at the kitchen table when I got home, the laptop closed, his hands flat on the surface, something in front of him I could not immediately name. The conversation started without a formal opening, the way conversations start in rooms that have been waiting for one. I told him clearly, in order, without raising my voice, 6 conferences in 4 months. Not once invited. He built a career she was supposed to applaud from the designated support position and assumed her silence was gratitude. He decided on her behalf that she would be bored, and it had apparently never occurred to him that what bored her was being left. These were facts. I gave him each one. He did not argue them. He sat with his hands flat on the table, and he was quiet long enough that I thought he was not going to respond at all. Then he said, "You're right." A pause. Then, "And you went to the club?" He said it the way he said things that were simply true. No emphasis, no performance of making a point. Being right about the first thing did not unmake the second thing, and he did not need to state this because the 4 words already contained it. I had more. I had prepared more. I gave him more of it. He watched me cycle through the points with the stillness of someone who has already reached a conclusion and is waiting, without impatience, for the presentation to end. He said, once without repeating it, without raising his voice, that he had spent 12 days trying to understand what he was supposed to do with knowing that she had been at that club and allowed what she allowed and come home and said nothing. He said he had been trying for 2 years to be a husband she could bring things to. The fact that she chose not to was the information. I told him he was making his feelings into a verdict. He did not respond to this. He said he had spoken to someone about his options. Clean. Factual. Dated. I asked what that meant. He said he thought we both knew. He went to the bedroom and the door closed. Not slammed, just closed. Quietly. Which was him. I texted Reva from the car before the hotel bar, earlier that evening. I need to talk to someone tonight. 2 ticks in the thread within minutes. Nothing followed. I called her number from the kitchen table after he went to bed. Voicemail. At the hotel bar before I had left, Theo mentioned, in passing the way you mention things that are already decided, that he had been looking at a work contract in France. Good timing, he said. He said it as information rather than discussion. I heard something to address later. The reader of that conversation understood it differently. I stayed at the kitchen table for an hour after the bedroom door closed. I had the correct accusation and the self-narrative and the points in order. I went through all of them in an empty kitchen. The flat was organized around me, surfaces clear, everything in its correct position. And it had never felt less like mine. I came home on a Thursday at 6:40. The building hallway smelled like the neighbours' cooking, the same Thursday smell it had been for 2 years. A printed court envelope was taped to the apartment door. My name, a solicitor's return address from the city, the paper slightly damp from the afternoon air. The woman from the second floor, I had said hello to her 3 times a week for 2 years without learning her name, was at the letterboxes. She watched me take the envelope from the door. Neither of us spoke. She went upstairs. I went inside, sat at the kitchen table, opened it looking for the operative language first. Temporary exclusive occupation order, marital home, pending divorce proceedings under consideration, 14 days to vacate, first hearing, 22 days from issue. His name, my name, the solicitor's name. Attached, a declaration referencing photographic evidence sourced from the venue's social media account, preserved and timestamped at 1:47 a.m. on the date in question. A written statement from Cassidy Hartley, 3 occasions, each named, each dated, each described in factual and specific terms. I read it twice. I got up and turned on the kitchen tap and washed my hands, which was not something I had planned. I dried them on the dish towel. I sat back down. I did not call anyone for 11 minutes. I called Cassidy. I said I was trying to understand what she had described and whether there might have been context missing from her account of what she observed. She let me finish. Then she said she had described what she saw. She said she had not been unkind about it. She said she was factual. She said she hoped I was okay. And she meant it. And the call ended. The version of myself in which other people's interpretations were the primary problem did not outlast the call. The voice note from Theo arrived 2 days later. He had accepted the Bordeaux contract. The timing, he said, could not honestly be better. He hoped she got things sorted. His voice had the quality of someone reporting good news about themselves. I listened to it once. I put my phone on the shelf of the borrowed flat in Dalston where I was already living and did not play it again. She moved into a borrowed flat in Dalston, a contact of Reva's, travelling for 3 months, white walls and a kitchen arranged by someone she had never met. The joint account was suspended pending financial disclosure at the first hearing, and she filed expenses separately for the first time in 2 years, and learned halfway through the first form that she did not know what she spent on herself when it was not shared. Cassidy removed her from the couple's group text. She found out 2 days after, when the thread was still active and her name was not in it. Theo sent "Hope you're settling in" 3 weeks later, from Bordeaux, and she read it and did not respond. The nightlife account was reassigned to a junior colleague following an internal review of the tagged post. Her manager sent a 2-sentence email and did not schedule a call. The performance of being desired is not the same as being desired. She built an audience in every room she walked into and lost the person who was watching her. An audience watches what you show them. And yet, she had the one man who drove across 2 neighbourhoods for bread she mentioned once, who sat in a room on a Tuesday for 3 hours without once telling her what to do. And apparently that was not the transaction she was managing. She was managing a different one, and the one she was managing could not give her either of those things. She is not sure she was wrong about what she needed. The cost was real regardless. Her wedding ring in a small ceramic dish on the kitchen shelf of the Dalston flat. The dish was already there when she arrived, left by someone she did not know, for a reason she did not know. She got very good at being wanted by people who were not watching her, and she lost the one person who was.